On a recent episode of The Young Turks, hosts Cenk Uygur and Anna Kasparian claimed that Aaron Maté denies that Syrian children were killed with chemical attacks and, quote, gets paid by the Russians. Maté called the segment insane and libelous.
Journalist and host of the Pushback, airing on the Gray Zone, Aaron Maté joins us to discuss. Aaron, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So what's going on? We wanted to bring you on to give you a chance to say your side of the issue and be clear. We did have Cenk Uygur on last week to discuss some other matters, and we did briefly discuss Jimmy Dore. So let's take a listen to that real quick.
Can we get your thoughts on the ongoing feud with Jimmy Dore, which I know a lot of our viewers are following very closely? Do you have anything to add to his most recent, I would say, comments on that issue?
No, look, the guy's kind of pathetic. And so he's now, most of his fans are right-wingers. And literally the Daily Stormer wrote an article defending him yesterday. Daily Stormer is a neo-Nazi website. Now, look, I don't know that Jimmy asked for it, so you can say, hey, well, they just happen to agree. It's not Jimmy's fault that he agrees with neo-Nazis. Okay, I guess. But that's disturbing. And he's said and done terrible things. He's a complete and utter liar. So beware, buyer beware. And by the way, what does Jimmy do all day, every day? Attack progressives. Justice Democrats are no good. You shouldn't trust the progressives in Congress. Now, I just criticized Justice Democrats a little bit earlier, even though I founded it. I thought they should have fought harder on $15 minimum wage. I thought they should have voted no. I thought they should have used their power, right? But that requires nuance. But now, on infrastructure bill, they're actually fighting really hard, and they are blocking the bill. So it depends on the facts, et cetera, but that's what an intelligent person does. Jimmy, on the other hand, wants to tear down all progressives. He almost never criticizes Trump. That's why his audience is mainly right-wingers. He never criticizes Republicans. His excuse is he's not relevant. He leads one of the major parties in this country. He's a lunatic who hates democracy. And you don't think that's relevant? Yeah, you don't think it's relevant because all your money and all of your audience is the right wing. So any progressive who gets tricked into believing Jimmy Dore is on your side, just look at his program. Well, don't. But if you look at his program, he's everything he says is over the top, ridiculous. It's lies. His lies about me are endless. If you ever listen to anything he says, it's a terrible mistake. He says, I'm in favor of bombing Syria. I've never said that. He's a preposterous liar. He's a ridiculous liar, and he serves the right wing, and his effort is to destroy the progressive movement from within. Beware of the crap that they are selling you.
Aaron, as you can see, Cenk didn't mention you, but we wanted to give you a chance to respond to some of the previous statements, especially around Syria.
Yeah, well, look, Jimmy can respond for himself, and I hope you will bring him on to answer what Cenk just said. By the way, I caught one egregious lie where Cenk just said that he didn't advocate bombing Syria. There's a clip from the Young Turks in 2013 that's been circulating where he does advocate bombing Syria. So Cenk is lying because Cenk is a liar, as we saw when Cenk declared on his show that I'm paid by the Russians without any evidence, because there is none. He's just making it up. And look, I think when Cenk talks about Jimmy's audience being right-wing, he's projecting. Jimmy's success over these last few years has come from the fact that he's speaking to an audience that is upset by the Democratic Party because they haven't been left-wing enough. Jimmy's actually an authentic progressive, and he's attracted people who are upset by the fact that the Democratic Party establishment has abandoned it, and attracted people who are upset that outlets like the Young Turks that portray themselves as being progressive have abandoned progressive values and have done things like advocating for foreign interventions. And in the case of Russiagate, buying into the dumbest conspiracy theory of all time, which Jimmy Dore debunked. So I think that's what helps explains this animus and these lies towards Jimmy Dore by Cenk. And then I got involved when they directed it at me. I was in Syria recently doing some reporting, and they had this, Cenk and Anna Kasparian had this on-air meltdown where they said I'm paid by the Russians, that I deny the killing of children. Anna Kasparian said that I likely work for dictators, and she gave me the finger and told me to F off. It was insane. And I think that meltdown reflects just like a general hostility that they have towards people who are upholding actual progressive values and upholding actual journalism standards.
Well, thanks for giving us your side, Aaron. While we have you here, we wanted to get your thoughts on recent U.S. foreign policy developments with the Ukraine.
Okay, but look, let me first address the Syria part of this because it's important. So the reason why they slandered me at that time is because I was in Syria. And Syria is a touchy subject for many people on the left. It has been divisive. But the facts to me are pretty overwhelming. And there's only a very small group of journalists that have been willing to acknowledge them. My colleagues and I at the Gray Zone are among them. So are Jimmy Dore, by the way. Jimmy Dore has been telling the truth about the fact that the U.S. and its allies have waged a multi-billion-dollar dirty war that left Syria in ruins. And I saw it firsthand when I was there. And a part of that reporting that I've done has been on this scandal at the OPCW, the world's top chemical weapons watchdog, where you have evidence of a very significant cover-up. So basically, in April 2018, the U.S., Britain, and France bombed Syria after they accused Syria of committing a chemical attack in the town of Douma. And there was video footage from Douma put out by militants who controlled it at the time of dead bodies. And they said that they were killed by a chemical attack. So Trump led the way in bombing Syria. A year later, the OPCW came out with a report basically aligning with the U.S. narrative that Syria was guilty of a chlorine attack. But then we got an extraordinary series of leaks that showed that actually the inspectors from the OPCW who went to Douma, they wrote up a report, and that report said there was no evidence of a chemical attack. And if you read the report closely, you actually see indications that they found evidence that this thing was staged. But instead of having their findings released to the public, people above them censored their report, tried to doctor the conclusions to falsely suggest Syrian government guilt. And basically, these inspectors, after they protested the censorship, they were taken off of the case. And we know this now because of a huge trove of documents that have come out via WikiLeaks and also at the Gray Zone. So I've been reporting on this for the last 2 years. It's an extraordinary story. It's a major pro-war deception, and it's allegations of a cover-up at the world's top chemical weapons watchdog, basically in the interest of the U.S. So I've been pretty much alone in the U.S. media in covering it. And so the Young Turks, instead of covering this story, have ignored it. And then when I went to Syria and I put out a short video talking about it, that helped trigger this meltdown. So what they've done in doing this is actually helping to bring attention to the story, which the rest of media have ignored, which I'm grateful for. But it also shows how progressive media outlets have been completely co-opted into going along with the talking points and narratives of the establishment, to the point that they're willing to slander independent journalists who are covering such an explosive story, such as a cover-up at the world's top chemical weapons watchdog. So it's been a very unpleasant experience. But on the positive side, it has helped bring attention to this important story of the OPCW whistleblowers. I just wanted to make that clear.
Well, Aaron, thank you for your side of the story here. And we want to be very clear. We don't expect you to speak for Jimmy. We did reach out to Jimmy Dore, and we welcome him on the show. We just haven't heard back yet. And, we thank you for your journalism and investigation into this story, as it's certainly something that everyone should be concerned about if there is deception at the chemical weapons watchdog nationally or internationally, that is. And we just wanted to bring up the next segment here and get your opinion on the Biden administration freezing weapons sales to Ukraine. Where are we on that? And that comes right after the Putin-Biden, well-publicized summit. What do you think's going on here?
Well, let's just first note the funny irony that when Trump did this, that triggered his impeachment. Now, of course, the allegation was that Trump was doing this for political reasons. But as a part of that, Adam Schiff and Jason Crow were getting up before Congress every day during the impeachment trial and saying that because Trump froze these weapon sales to Ukraine, he was endangering our national security. And Adam Schiff even said the United States aids Ukraine so that we fight the Russians there and we don't have to fight the Russians here. So does Adam Schiff think that now, because Biden froze this military assistance, that Russia is going to invade? It's just a funny irony, and it shows the bankruptcy, the hollowness of the Democrats' Cold War rhetoric that they rallied around throughout Trump's presidency, which I always thought was a huge mistake and a disaster for many reasons. But in terms of this decision now, they've apparently frozen, one proposal to send military assistance to Ukraine. In terms of what they're actually going to do, look, this administration has major responsibility for what's happening in Ukraine. It was Biden's support along with other people in the administration back under President Obama back in 2014 for the Maidan coup in Ukraine, the overthrow of the Yanukovych government that basically set off this whole conflict between the U.S. and Russia inside Ukraine. And now it's still ongoing. They're still fighting in the Donbass. There's no resolution. Russia has Crimea. It's not giving it back. So in terms of what Biden does, the question is, does he want to keep sending money to Ukraine so that people will keep dying for a useless proxy war on Russia's borders, one that Russia will not tolerate losing? They're not going to allow a NATO state on their border. So that's the question for Biden. On the, I think, a positive side, whereas Trump was incredibly hawkish in his policies, he tried to stop construction of the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline, which was a major pipeline between Russia and Germany. Biden came in and he dropped that effort. He's actually dropped those sanctions, which is a sign of, I think, conciliation towards Russia. He also reached a very important nuclear agreement with Russia, renewing the New START treaty. So there are hawks inside the Biden administration, but there are also are some signs that for all the rhetoric we heard about Trump being a Putin puppet, the reality was that Trump's administration was hawkish on Russia. And there are some early signs that Biden is, thankfully, easing away from that.
Well, thanks so much for sharing your perspective with us. We really appreciate it. Thanks for being with us, Aaron.
Thanks for having me.
Next on Rising, we're diving into inflation, the job market, and the long-term effects of the pandemic. Stay with us.